Oh, hi there. Welcome back to Geek-Stew, and today, guys, welcome back to another Conspiracy Theories with Ike. So today, guys, this series is actually a little bit shorter. It's not as in depth as the last two. Last two, obviously, were kind of hand in hand in some ways, but this one's a little bit of a shorter, easier to kind of explain type deal. But it is still very interesting. Has some pretty interesting applications and potential issues with the world around us type deals. So let's get into it. This is still from the same iceberg. The iceberg that I'm using is pretty detailed. It has a lot of information on it. So this is actually still from the bottom tier. And it's, definitely an interesting concept and a very deep concept, but I don't know if I would necessarily call it a bottom tier, just because so far the other objects and concepts on this bottom tier have been literally talking about the thought process and the mortality of deities and gods. So definitely maybe not as a deep concept per se. Still very interesting and very, I would say, very complicated question and process, but definitely shorter. So let's get into it. Today, guys, we're going to talk about the final understanding. So in as few words as possible, just to kind of make this as simple as possible, the final understanding, it does relate to essentially every other conspiracy theory and every other physical theory about the world we live in to some degree. Because the final theory is an understanding and full comprehension of the laws of the universe. And a lot of theories have to do with kind of how does the universe work? How does this work? How does that work? Is there such thing as a God? There's all these different and very interesting concepts that kind of revolve around the laws of the universe. And the final understanding is basically that. You understand everything. Now, this part isn't very complex because really that's all there is to it. You understand everything. You have a deep comprehension of how basically the universe was created and how everything works. And that could be a good thing. It could be a good thing to have that intimate knowledge of the laws of the universe, but there are some people who would think that this might have dire consequences for the rest of us because of somebody kind of finding this singularity type event where they understand everything. So what I would like to say now is that the final understanding kind of goes hand in hand with another concept that is essentially the same thing, but it's called the final theory. Basically, the theory that explains everything, right? The final understanding means that you have developed a theory to explain everything. Basically, the theory that explains everything from creation to now. And so the final theory wouldn't, it's basically like the equation to life, right? Basically, you understand how to create universes. So the final theory would be that I have created a theory that explains and has the comprehension and knowledge of all things and how everything was created. Now, really, that's it. That's essentially all there is to it. Now, the thing that I do want to also talk about is that some people think that this might have consequences for the rest of us or consequences for humanity. And really, that's going to be the next thing I kind of talk about. Obviously, this is all theoretical, of course. But yes, final understanding, final theory, very simple. You have a very deep and full comprehension and understanding of the laws of the universe. You've been able to develop a theory that basically explains that everything, how everything works, from creation to now, how everything works. Now we kind of have to circumvent into related concepts, talking about maybe what kind of impacts this might have for the rest of us. related concepts that kind of go into this theory as well. A lot of people kind of attach string theory and a lot of other physics and everything else kind of theories with it, which would make sense. If you have a comprehension of the universe, then you would also understand things like string theory. You'd be able to prove them without a shadow of a doubt type deal. There's some related concepts. The final understanding is related to the Illuminati. So I was reading some stuff on Reddit because obviously that's where I go for all this stuff. And some people were talking about how the final understanding already exists. That the final understanding is already real. Somebody somewhere knows it, and it's actually related to the Illuminati. The Illuminati are using the final theory and the final understanding as a method in which to control the world. They understand how everything works, right? They have a very deep, intimate knowledge of the groundwork of our universe. So they're basically using that knowledge and hoarding it over people in positions of power to kind of have some leverage or control. There are also people who think that there's like some like god or deity or somebody who's ascended to a god or deity form because of them finding out this information once they have understood the final understanding of the final theory. Like, they ascended, right? And now they're like the god of Earth or something, right? So that's another kind of like related concept. Now that one's a little more obscure. I mean, obviously the Illuminati is pretty obscure, but at least the Illuminati has some real life standing to some degree. Let's see. The final understanding of the final theory would be the signal of the end times. There were some people who were talking about how like I don't know if it was like Revelations or something like that, but there's like a passage in some like end times book like Revelations, or maybe something from Homeboy who does like all the predictions. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but basically there was some like person who wrote a book, whether it be the Revelations of the Bible or whatever else it was, and basically they said that once you understand how the world works, the world will end, or something like that. Basically saying that once we have developed that comprehension, then the world just ends. Now, obviously, again, that's just kind of speculation because a lot of stuff from a lot of these books and texts are typically translated and interpreted, especially things like the Bible. So anything that's in Revelations, I have a very hard time, A, believing, B, having any serious understanding of. Obviously, I know that a lot of people have different opinions on the Bible, but I guess that's just mine. So that one's kind of cool though, because honestly, it would make sense. Like if I'm finally able to understand the very groundwork of the universe and the very groundwork of how everything works, I mean, I would imagine that would have some very serious implications for everybody involved. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about as a related concept was the final understanding could shake the fabric of the universe if ever conceived. Now, this one was actually interesting. I was reading through some stuff, and I actually was able to Google this one because Google has a little bit more information about this. And so some of this information is just kind of, plucked from different sources from the internet, but the original theory itself did come from Reddit. I had to kind of find the very base theory and all that information from Reddit, but some of this other stuff was just kind of plucked from other sources, which was actually neat to do because I didn't have to just rely on this information from Reddit. Not that I hate doing that, because the last two videos were primarily Reddit, maybe with a snippet of the internet, right? So this one is a little bit different. Basically, if the concept of the final theory or the final understanding was ever truly conceived, basically the structure of the universe would undo itself, because simply having the knowledge of how the universe works is enough to unravel the universe, right? So it's like, I think the person compared the universe to like a ball of yarn, and that once we... I can't remember how exactly they worded it, but basically they compared the universe to a ball of yarn, and that once we have this final understanding and this knowledge of how the world and the universe works, that basically it's pulling on the string of the ball of yarn and it's unraveling it, right? And basically that's what they kind of said. Obviously we don't understand like what exactly is going to happen. Like we don't know like, is the world just gonna explode? Like I don't know. But yeah, that's essentially the the gist of that one. That one's a little more obscure. I think that one's probably the most obscure out of all of these. Because, like, you know, I don't know how realistic the universe's unraveling is per se, but that being said, that's essentially all there is to it. Now, there's a lot more information, I'm sure, out there about this in different areas, different sources. I'm sure that people have different theories about, like, what this means and, like, what the final understanding would do per se. But I thought that some of these related concepts were pretty cool, you know, related to the Illuminati, shake the fabric of the universe and cause it to unravel. The final understanding would mean the end times, like a biblical end times. That's kind of cool stuff. Obviously, I'm not sure that I 100% agree with any of this. I don't even think that necessarily you or I could fully grasp the depth and the levity, I guess you could say, of having that intimate knowledge of how the literal universe works. I don't know how my vacuum works, much less the universe, so take that for what you will. But I'm going to kind of move into final thoughts here. But this is definitely one of those ones that it's a little more of an interesting thing to think about, but it's not very complex, right? Not a whole lot of complexity to basically just having knowledge of the universe. But anyhow, moving into final thoughts, talk a little bit more about the theory and kind of how I came to this one. But anyhow, hope you guys enjoy this section. But final thought time. All right, it's time for some final thoughts from Mike. I am doing this early in the morning before I go to work because I work from home. So I usually do my videos in the very early morning to kind of get them done and get them out for you guys. So hope you guys enjoyed. So just some brief final thoughts. Actually, let me take a sip of coffee. Delicious. That probably made me shit my pants here in a little bit, but anyways, so some real quick final thoughts. So the final concept of the final theory and the final understanding, you know, but obviously, and you may have heard like a little bit of rustling. This is my AirPod. I use this as my form of communicating with you. But the point being is that the kind of some final thoughts about this is the final understanding, the final theory are very simple, as in they're not hard to grasp. I feel like some of the theories on this iceberg are hard to grasp, and that's been sort of my struggle, is trying to like grasp like what the hell do they mean, like God's ego death and God's last wish. I still really don't understand God's ego death to an extent. Like I feel like if I dumb it down to the point where I just call it like an enlightenment, I kind of understand it. But at the same time, it's like I know that it's not just enlightenment. There's a lot more to it than that. But anyhow, the what I would want to say too is that these theories were fairly easy to understand and grasp on a very basic level, but I definitely feel like there are some probably deeper levels that you could go with the final understanding and the final theory, such as, you know, reporting or proposing a final theory or a final understanding of the world. But I am nowhere near that level of intellect, I guess I should say, to be able to give you a actual final theory or what I believe to be the final understanding of the world. Or what is it they say from Hitchhiker's Guide? The 7 is the answer to everything, or 22 or whatever.
Mr. Madison, what you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
That's my final understanding, basically. Anyhow, so some final thoughts. Good theory, overall interesting. Wasn't as difficult to research as some of the other stuff that I researched so far. But, you know, it could definitely have been a worse theory for me to research. I could have been coming upon SoundCloud rappers who are doing songs about God's ego death and God's last wish and everything else. But anyways, So I want to give some special thanks to some people. I think I've thanked this person before, but I want to thank them again. Thanks to Cicada1205 for the actual iceberg. If I don't think I've put it in the video yet, but I'll put it here. It's a huge iceberg. I mean, look, completely, you can't even see any of the stuff on that iceberg because of how big it is and how much shit there is on the iceberg itself. But I took this from the bottom level. All of the theories that I've done recently have been from the bottom level. I'm kind of doing like a reverse concept where I'd go from the bottom up. So I'll probably go to the next tier because the only other thing on this iceberg really isn't worth talking about. Not that it's not worth talking about, but it's a little more of an obscure concept. And it doesn't necessarily interest me as much as the ones that I've talked about so far. And I do apologize if I'm clearing my throat too much, guys. I'm still getting over being sick, so I don't want to sound like I'm hitting puberty. But that being said, I'm probably going to move up to the next tier of the iceberg, which still has some pretty interesting stuff on it for sure. But definitely it's been a lot of fun talking about the stuff on the bottom iceberg because it's stuff that I've never really heard of before. And it's stuff that's really interesting to me. That's why I make a video per like concept. And like I give a lot of kudos to people like Wendigoon who can sit down and do all these in just one fell swoop and do an hour-long video. But I definitely feel like my video would be way too long because I talk way too much. But anyhow, other person I wanted to give a little kudos to is on Reddit, Autoroxia_no_Drachi. For that, basically they were the one that kind of gave me the very basic understanding of the final understanding. So I want to thank those two folks who, put that information out there for other people to research and use. If for some reason, me including your information in this video is unsatisfactory to you, let me know. And I will, of course, do something. I'll pull down maybe I won't pull down the video, but maybe I'll put a little, at the end or something where they don't have to listen to me or whatever. I don't know. Anyhow, but that being said, I hope everybody enjoyed this video. If you guys enjoyed the video, leave us a like and a subscribe. Hit us up on social media. We have Twitter and Facebook. I also have a TikTok. If you want to go follow me on TikTok, feel free to. I also have Twitter. But that being said, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, do all that good stuff. And then reach out to us if you want to join the Geek-Stew crew. We're always open to expanding our product and expanding our contribution and everything else to other people. Or if you want Geek-Stew to contribute to you or be on a podcast, I'm always cool doing stuff like that too. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm always open for stuff like that. I don't do a whole lot else because, Panda Express time, pandemic time. Anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys are staying safe, staying happy, staying healthy. Don't get sick like I did. Granted, mine was a sinus thing, but still, don't get sick. It sucks, man. Wash your hands. Continue wearing masks, everything else. By the way, that Delta variant, man, that's something interesting, too. I don't know if there's conspiracy theories about that yet, but shit, that stuff's probably out there killing people, too, and people probably aren't wearing masks. Anyways, get vaccinated, spay and neuter your animals. I don't know what else to say, guys. So, peace.